Hello hunters, and welcome back to Super Fan Natural. Ghosts.
Goats? Ghosts!
Ghosts. The spirits of the dead. The earthbound souls of those who should have passed on. Spooky, scary specters. Ghosts are one of the cornerstones of Supernatural. In fact, a ghost is the main monster in the very first episode of the series. They've been around since day one, and in the 15 years that the show was running, we saw a bunch of ghastly ghosts and fabulous phantoms with a whole lot of variety between them. In this video, I'll go over the different types of ghosts that appear in Supernatural and explore what they do and how they haunt. As always, we've got to cover the basics first, but thankfully, ghosts are pretty easy to understand. They're the souls of dead humans who, for one reason or another, haven't moved on to the afterlife and instead hang around the mortal realm a bit longer. Well, in truth, they don't actually stick around the earth, per se. Instead, spirits of the dead spend most of their time in a place called the Veil, which is a ghostly dimension that exists parallel to the physical world. This is why ghosts are usually invisible and intangible. They're literally not on the same plane of existence as living stiffs. However, it is possible for powerful or pissed ghosts to pierce the veil and actually step back into the land of the living for a bit. The exact science of how this works is hazy, and also not science, but it seems to involve the ghosts drawing in physical energy, since this kind of paranormal activity causes temperatures to drop and electronics to wonk out. Once they've manifested, ghosts can become pretty scary as they come equipped with some spooky spectral spirit skills like telekinesis, teleportation, inhuman strength, and the ability to jump into living bodies and possess people. In addition to these basic abilities, we also see a few ghosts pack particularly peculiar powers, such as mind control, future sight, super hacking the Wi-Fi, and the ability to possess Thundercats action figures. By far, the biggest advantage ghosts have in a fight is the fact that they're, well, ghosts. You can't exactly fist fight them since anything you try and throw their way will just pass through their ethereal form. The only things that you can hit a ghost with are salt and iron, since, for some reason, they'll dissolve the spirit's semi-corporeal body and push him back into the veil. Unfortunately, that's just a temporary fix. The only true solution to a violent spirit is to force them into the afterlife. This can be tricky, but thankfully, there's one method that usually works pretty well. See, in order to avoid moving on, most ghosts need to tether themselves to a physical object that they had a strong connection to in life. More often than not, they use DNA like bones, blood, or hair, but some are capable of latching onto things that they had an emotional or spiritual connection to. Most ghosts can't travel very far from their material anchor, and if it gets torched with hot, sexy fire, then their link to the living world will also go up in flames, thus forcing them into the great beyond. That's not the only way to get rid of a ghost. In some cases, the surly spirit is anchored by strong emotions or regrets, and in cases like that, it is possible to put them to rest by giving them closure or convincing them to let go of their hatred and fears. Or you could just get another ghost to kick their ass, that works too. The last bit of general info that I'll give you is that ghosts don't always look ghostly. Most ghosts look relatively similar to their living selves, but we also see some that appear to be completely different inhuman creatures. There's no better place to start this list than with the most basic form of earthbound soul, the simple, bog-standard ghost. So, when a human dies, their soul is ejected from their body, and they're greeted by a supernatural entity known as a Reaper. Reapers are the servants of death, like the sentient embodiment of death, and their jobs are simple. They carry the souls of the dead into the afterlife. Basically, dead people don't just automatically go up or down. They have to be taken to paradise or the pit by a Reaper. The thing is, you don't actually have to go with the Reaper. It's completely legal to refuse their unearthly Uber. This is how most ghosts are created. Someone dies and doesn't want to move on, so they just cling to their earthly tether and refuse to be taken away by a Reaper. Now, beyond and even before this point, things can go in a bunch of different directions. But most of the time when someone turns down a Reaper, they at least start as a simple standard version of a ghost that retain a good deal of their mind and humanity. These basic ghosts don't really have a fancy name, but I sometimes call them lingering spirits because that's what they do. They linger, eternally hanging around in the shadows of the physical world. The thing that really differentiates lingering spirits from other types of ghosts is just how human they are. They often appear similar to how they did at or slightly before their time of death. They're fairly cognizant and capable of communication, and while they may have some hang-ups, they aren't completely consumed by one particular emotion or state of mind. Now, I want to stress that in many cases, this lingering humanity deteriorates as the spirit devolves into one of the other types of ghosts that we'll discuss in this video, So, this spiritual state often acts as a starting point for a much darker story. However, we do see a few instances of lingering spirits retaining their humanity for long periods of time, sometimes even centuries. It's not clear if these lingering ghosts that reject the Reaper ride can willingly move on or be put to rest through means besides cremation. It really doesn't seem like it, but who knows? We just don't really get to see that many gentle, non-violent ghosts in the show. So it is possible for a ghost to stay pretty normal and level-headed. However, that's not usually how things work out. See, the reason ghosts are something that hunters have to fight is because when the souls of the dead hang around the land of the living, their minds tend to deteriorate, and the longer they linger, the more likely they are to become so lost in their corrupt thoughts and feelings that they become angry and violent. When this happens, the ghost becomes what's known as a vengeful spirit, also sometimes called a violent or malevolent spirit. Anyone can become a vengeful spirit, but most of the folks that end up going down this path died a violent death and or lived a violent life, causing their rage and regret to follow them into undeath and speed up the mind-melting process. Once they're sufficiently brain-broken, these phantoms become a lot less chatty and just all around less cooperative, meaning that they usually can't be talked out of their homicidal state. Out of all the types of ghost on this list, the vengeful spirits have the most variety in terms of appearance and behavior. These things are all over the place when it comes to how they look, what they want, and how they get it. However, there is one characteristic that unites them all: a willingness to hurt and kill people. In some cases, the ghost will simply lash out at anyone that crosses their haunt, but we also see spirits who direct their vengeance at a specific target. For example, the ghost of serial killer H.H. Holmes, who was a real person by the way, picked on young attractive women just like he did in life. And insane workaholic P.T. Sandover honed in on employees that he felt were lazy and who didn't take their jobs seriously. It's worth noting that, while every ghost in this category is willing to attack the living, they don't always do so in a direct fashion. Going back to Sandover, when the dude sniffed out a slacker, he wouldn't just run up and give him the old invisible suplex. No, instead he would scramble their brains, causing them to become psychotically, self-destructively loyal to their jobs and the company. For another example of a ghost whose hostility took a strange form, we can look to Father Gregory. Daddy Greg was a priest who, in death, believed himself to be an avenging angel, and so his ghost not only had a very angelic appearance, he also didn't attack people directly. Instead, he used mind control to coerce sinners into killing other sinners. The Good Father also highlights another point about vengeful spirits. While most are completely beyond reason, some can actually be reached and convinced to move on of their own accord. Faja Greg was snapped out of his angelic delusion by another priest who put him to rest by reciting his last rites. In another case, a killer Wi-Fi ghost was put to rest after FaceTiming his wife, proving that love can overcome any obstacle, including being trapped in the internet. So yeah, some vengefuls can be brought back to reality. However, on the other end of the spectrum, you've got spiteful spirits that are nearly, if not completely cognizant, but who willfully choose to be murderous pricks. Some of the best examples of this would probably be Margaret Fox, who enjoyed killing fake psychics, and Whitman Van Ness, who not only killed off people who entered his home, he had also trapped their souls inside and somehow prevent them from moving on. These are the ghosts that you really can't reason with, and who will almost always need to be cremated. Sometimes this type of ghost is specifically referred to as a violent spirit, but the show jumbles up the nomenclature all the time, so the exact distinction is hazy. There's a lot of little details I could talk about with vengeful spirits. However, in order to keep this video relatively short, I'm just going to end this section by covering a few of the wackiest hauntings in the series. Mary Worthington became a version of Bloody Mary, and she would appear in mirrors and murk people with reflection magic? Jordan McNeil was a nerd who would possess action figures in order to attack his coworkers from beyond the grave. The Ghost Kid was a, ghost kid who was able to bend reality in order to suck Sam, Dean, and Cass into an episode of Scooby-Doo, which he was then somehow able to alter the plot of. Finally, there's Cyrus Dorian, a racist whose ghost took the form of a douchey truck in order to run down black people. Yeah, vengeful spirits can be scary, but they can also be real weird. Vengeful spirits are ghosts ruled by a variety of negative thoughts and emotions, and they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. We're now going to talk about a couple of spirit subtypes that are created and controlled by specific emotions, starting with one of the most basic human feelings: fear. When a person dies in a state of extreme overwhelming fear, it's possible for their soul to hang around as a special type of ghost known as a buru buru. By the way, I'm using the pronunciation that they used in the show, so if that's incorrect, sorry. Anyway, at a glance, Buru-Buru can easily be mistaken for a regular lingering or vengeful spirit. However, they have a few specific traits that distinguish them from the rest of the dead. Their most unique quality is the ability to infect the living with a kind of ghost sickness. See, due to the way that they died, fear is woven into the very essence of these ghosts, to the point that it becomes a kind of infection that can be spread to the living people via physical contact. Once infected, the ghost sickness will gradually crank up the victim's fear response, until eventually they become irrationally terrified of pretty much everything. In its final stages, the infection causes its victims to experience vivid hallucinations of the things that they fear the most, putting them in a constant state of intense terror that ultimately causes their heart to just crap out. Now, a weird quirk with this ghost sickness is that it doesn't infect anyone who comes into contact with the ghost or victims. No, the infection seems to specifically target people who use fear and intimidation to control and terrorize others. Hearing that probably makes you think of bullies and abusers, and yeah, they seem to be the primary targets, but it is possible for folks who you would usually consider to be good people to be afflicted. For example, Dean contracted the contagion because, while he is a good dude, he does weaponize fear more than the average Joe. The only way to cure ghost sickness is to dispatch the Buru-Buru. This can be done through torching their tether. However, if that's not possible, then there is one more option on the table. See, while some vengeful spirits can be laid to rest by giving them peace, the exact opposite approach can be useful against fear-based ghosts. In at least some cases, a Buru-Buru can quite literally be scared to death. They can be put in such an intense state of fear that their soul reflexively nopes itself into the afterlife. The only time we saw this done, it was done by recreating the ghost's death, though I'm not sure if that would work in every case. That's what happens when a ghost is created through fear. However, it's also possible to get a special type of haunting from deaths involving betrayal. Deaths caused by an act of treachery can cause the betrayed to become a specter, or a ghost obsessed with vengeance. Well, more so than the standard vengeful spirit. See, this is why we need different terminology. Specters are some of the strangest ghosts in the series due to the very unique way that they haunt the living. See, it doesn't seem like specters can actually manifest a corporeal form, meaning that the only way that they can influence the physical world is through possession. Unfortunately for them, they also can't just jump into people the way other ghosts can. So, if they want to hijack a warm body, they've got to wait until someone manhandles their remains. For example, the only specter in the show could control people while they had physical contact with a penny that he was tethered to. And as soon as they dropped the coin, the Confederate ghost lost his grip on the living world, just like his side lost the Civil War. Even after getting a flesh puppet, specters don't actually pilot their vessels directly. Instead, their presence causes the victim to become consumed by a desire to get revenge against anyone that they feel betrayed them. It basically acts more like mind control. But if you see the reflection of someone possessed by a specter, then you just might catch a glimpse of the ghost itself, which, in at least the case of Vance Collins, looked grayer and more zombified than the usual ghost. These things also generate a special type of ectoplasm that's green instead of black, which is neat, I guess. There doesn't seem to be any special way to dispatch a specter, you just gotta salt and burn their remains or tether. So we've covered ghosts that are vengeful, fearful, and wrathful. Now let's talk about a type of ghost that isn't full of anything. In fact, these phantoms are so empty that I call them lifeless spirits. Like I said earlier, when souls hang around the veil for too long, their minds tend to deteriorate, and in some cases this can lead to violent psychopathy. However, other times, the extended time trapped in the shadows of the material plane can cause a ghost to simply lose all motivating thoughts and feelings, leading to them just standing around, staring off into space, not moving or speaking or really doing anything. From what I can gather, it doesn't seem like this is usually a fate that befalls those who willingly stick around past their expiration date. Instead, when ghosts end up lifeless, it's usually because they've been forcibly trapped in the veil by some other force or entity. For example, many of the souls trapped by the aforementioned Whitman Van Ness would end up in this kind of empty state, just standing around his dusty-ass house and occasionally having brief moments of madness. We also see something similar to happen to souls that have been sucked into the nest of a soul eater, though that situation is a little iffy because it's not clear how many of those folks are actually dead due to the nests existing outside of normal space-time. Because these ghosts don't really do anything, they don't usually require intervention from hunters. Actually, when hunters do end up working a case involving lifeless spirits, it's more often than not to help them, since, again, it usually means that they've been trapped against their will. Then again, since living people don't usually see these ghosts at all, I guess it's possible that they're more common than we think. There could be millions of them littered around the globe, just standing in the veil, staring at nothing, unable to move on. Sad. Our next category of Casper is one with an extremely specific MO. If a young mother is cheated on by her partner, then goes insane and offs her kids, then herself, her soul may just end up wandering the world as a woman in white. Yes, that's apparently a situation that happens often enough to produce a specific subspecies of spirit. These white women have exactly one goal in Undeath: hunting down unfaithful dudes, seducing them, then when they start getting frisky, they straight up murder their cheating asses. Now, some people might find that to be an appropriate course of action, but keep in mind that these ghosts aren't exactly moral paragons. The one woman in white that we witnessed did murk a couple genuine horn dogs, but she also tried to force herself onto a very unwilling Sam in order to make him worthy of ghost justice. As the name suggests, these ghosts look like women, in white. It also seems like they're usually young and attractive in order to score with the infidels, but we also saw one flash this weird skeletal face, which I'm guessing is supposed to be their true form or something. We only saw one woman in white in the series, and she was dealt with in a very strange way. After Sam drove her into her house, where she committed her crimes, the spirits of her kids ran up to her and, I guess, dragged her into hell? Not sure if this is something that can be done with all whites, but whatever. Next up, we've got two types of ghost with death in their name. Firstly, we've got death omens. Now, I know that sounds super ominous. However, death omens don't actually exist to cause death. They're there to warn people about impending doom. Death omens appear to mortals who are about to die, usually via murder, and they attempt to warn the would-be victims of their impending grisly end. Sometimes these warnings come from a previous victim of the killer. For example, the first death omen in the show was a lady who got killed by a crooked cop, and she would appear to others who were on his hit list. Now, one of the things that makes these ghosts frustrating is that while their intentions are good, their methods aren't the most direct. What do I mean? Well, it's very rare for an omen to just appear before their target and tell them directly, "This dude is going to kill you." Instead, most leave vague messages that often require the assistance of hunters to decode. For example, the ghost of Margaret Fox targeted fake psychics, so her sister Anna's ghost would try to warn them with real psychic visions. However, the victims didn't know what the hell was happening, and even when the Winchesters intervened, they clocked the premonitions as threats instead of warnings. This case was especially strange since Anna could actually talk, so I really don't understand why she didn't just tell the targets what was going on. Usually the death omens don't really have to be dealt with in and of themselves. More often than not, they'll just go away on their own once the subject of their warnings is taken care of. Still, if they're too bothersome, then they can be torched just like other ghosts. Moving away from death omens, we now have death echoes. Like omens, echoes are mostly harmless. Instead of causing or warning about death, echoes relive the end of their lives over and over and over again in an endless loop forever. These ghosts are so thoroughly trapped in this one moment that they're usually blind to the world around them. They don't really interact with the living. It kind of seems like they don't even know that they're dead. They just appear, get blown away by whatever did them in, then vanish and do the whole thing over again later. We don't really know what causes someone to become a death echo, but it seems like it might have something to do with deaths that are extremely sudden or unexpected. For example, of the three that we saw in the show, one was gunned down suddenly, and the other was hit by a train. Both of those people also had their remains stolen by a massive creep, so maybe that has something to do with it. Now, some of you are probably wondering, if these ghosts don't know that they're dead, can't you just tell them and snap them out of it? And yeah, that is a possible way to deal with them. However, it's extremely difficult to get through to these folks. Usually it requires you to have some kind of connection to them, and even then, you gotta dig deep and really connect to them heart to heart. If you manage to snap them out of it, it seems like they can freely move on to the great beyond, and they can even take another ghost with them, which is pretty cool. The biggest question I have about these spirits is, if they're created from a shocking sudden death, can it be one that's shockingly good? Like, say your heart gives out due to some extra good lovin', could you become a death echo and relive that experience forever? Thus far, all the ghosts that we've talked about have been made by dead people avoiding or being denied their final judgment. That's how most souls become ghosts. However, there are actually cases of spirits that did move on, being sent back to Earth to wreak havoc. We don't really see this from people that made it into heaven, but it's shockingly common from souls of the damned that claw their way back to the land of the living. More often than not, these sinister sinners take the form of demons. Yes, in Supernatural, demons are human souls, just ones that have been poked and prodded so much that their entire being has been corrupted by darkness. Honestly, calling demons ghosts is a bit iffy. I've made a whole video talking about demons, so here I'm going to touch on just a few of the basics. Like specters, most demons can't really manifest a corporeal form on Earth, and instead they have to possess people to get things done. However, unlike most ghosts, demons aren't really bound by any earthly tether. Yes, some have bodily remains that can be torched to destroy them. However, when outside of a meat suit, demons are able to freely fly around the world in the form of evil smoke. While inside of a living person, demons wield a bunch of powers, including telekinesis and super strength. Some can teleport and create fire. Some on the higher levels can even do all sorts of stuff like read minds, invade dreams, vaporize angels, and much, much more. Another advantage that demons have over regular ghosts is that they're usually more cognizant, at least insofar as they know what's going on. So, in some ways, it seems like demons are a little bit better off than regular dead people. However, there is one major drawback to demondom. See, demons can actually be killed in a much more permanent way than ghosts. It usually takes special weapons, powers, or magic, but they can be ejected from the living world. When that happens, they don't go to hell or heaven or even the Vale. Instead, they're sent to the empty, a void of non-existence that lies outside of creation. Now, they don't technically not exist. Some part of their consciousness continues to live on, but it's trapped beneath an endless ocean of nothingness, smothered in a restless sleep forever. Demons are the most common form of hellspawn spirit, but they're not the only ones we saw. In Season 15, God himself opened up a rupture into hell, allowing hundreds of naughty spirits to fly out of the pit and return to Earth for a few days. Some of these souls were able to exist as regular vengeful spirits. However, the majority of them took on a form that I don't believe we ever saw before. Instead of looking like regular dead people, these damned souls took the form of ghostly gray skeletons with an ethereal red glow emitting from their eyes and chest. It wasn't just their look that set them apart from the rest of the damned. These spirits didn't seem to have much of an ability to interact with the physical world. Instead, they kind of acted more like demons, flying around freely and needing to jump into bodies in order to do much of anything. This has led me to believe that these things are on their way to becoming demons. They're almost there, but they just haven't taken the final steps yet, and the red glow represents the dying light of their human soul. That's not confirmed, but I think it makes sense. We don't really know how you'd normally deal with these ghosts. You could probably torch their remains. However, you'd first have to ID them, then go find their bodies, which could be anywhere. Once burnt, I don't know what would happen to the earthbound damned souls. Maybe they return to hell, maybe they get sent to the empty, who knows. We also don't really know if it's possible for these ghosts to leave hell through any other means besides a direct hole into the pit. Considering the fact that we never saw them outside the first 3 episodes of Season 15, I'm guessing that it's not common, if possible at all. Alright, let's wrap up this spooky video by briefly talking about a couple of creatures that are sorta like ghosts, but aren't. First, there's poltergeists. In Supernatural, poltergeists aren't ghosts. At least, I don't think they are. They don't seem like they are. In truth, the show is a little vague regarding these things, but the only one that we ever saw seemed more like a formless malevolent force than a ghost. It didn't have a coherent form. Instead, it manifested as a series of telekinetic events that caused chaos around the house. Now, it did seem to have some degree of intelligence, as it was able to set traps and fight against the boys, but we never hear it, speak. Whatever they are, poltergeists don't seem to be completely tethered to one specific area. They've got at least some ability to travel, and they gravitate towards places that have been visited by evil. The only ways to get rid of a poltergeist are to A, use a ritual involving hex bags placed at specific locations within the haunted area, or B, get a ghost to destroy the violent spirit. Next, there's a type of ghostly creature known as a shoujo. These things are referred to as Japanese alcohol spirits, though it's not clear if they're supposed to be human ghosts or something else entirely. They look like yurei, a type of Japanese ghost from real-life mythology, but the way they operate makes it seem like they probably aren't actually ghosts. Whatever they are, shoujo are known to haunt breweries, and while we don't know much about their usual activities, we do know that they can be real nasty. See, with the right know-how, it's possible to bind a shoujo within a special box. Then, once captured, they can be sent out as a kind of attack dog against one's enemies. One of the things that makes shoujo so dangerous is the fact that they're invisible to anyone who isn't drunk, and the people who can see them are, well, drunk. Shoujo can be killed with a blessed katana, meaning that if they are ghosts, they're one of the few types of human spirits that can be shivved to death. Finally, we've got banshees. These wailing monstrosities look quite ghostly. However, they don't seem to be human spirits. In real myth, banshees are sometimes classified as fairies, but I don't think that connection was ever officially made in the show. One thing they did keep from Irish folklore is their scream. banshees let out a ghastly wail that only certain mortals can hear. Most of the time, these cries are meant to be a warning to people of their impending doom. But sometimes you get a dark-sided banshee who uses their sonic powers to drive people self-destructively crazy. Once the victim bites the dust, the screaming spirit will feed on their brains using a creepy anteater tongue. It's real weird. Like Shoujo, banshees have a very particular weakness.
Gold!
Yeah, just gotta poke them with a bit of gold and they poof. That means that there's a non-zero chance that at some point in the past, a banshee was killed by a gold ring-covered backhand from one of those stereotypical 70s pimps. Well guys, we're talking about ghosts getting pimp slapped to death, so I feel like it's probably a good time to end this video. I hope you found it hauntingly spooktacular. If not, it might not be the only one this month. We'll see about that later, but for now, carry on.